Welcome back to today's video. In today's video, I'm making my prediction for the 2024 election, less than 50 days away from the election. Before we get into today's video, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below and like the video. It's very helpful if you're able to subscribe and like the video and possibly comment down below whether or not you agree or disagree with my electoral map. And so we're looking at the 2024 electoral map with all 50 states as being blank. Go ahead and start by looking at some of the polling data. Now, the polling data has had a slight bump for the former president in terms of the margins of what he may win some of these states by. So, taking a look at the state of Arizona, currently Donald Trump is ahead by 1.6%. And in the last five polls, he's either tied or ahead of Kamala Harris. Moving on from the state of Arizona, let's take a look at the state of Nevada. Currently, we can see that Donald Trump and Kamala Harris are effectively almost tied here. Kamala Harris with a very small lead with only 0.2%, but I think that 0.2% is going to be very instrumental. Due to the fact that if you take a look, for example, if I were to go back to 2020, going back to 2020 in our electoral map here, let me just open up this tab. In 2020, if you take a look at the state of Nevada, Nevada polling data is actually pretty accurate. So if I were to take a look at the state of Nevada, it had Biden ahead in the lead up to the election by 2.4% in the polls, and Biden did end up winning by 2.4%. Now, if you go back to 2016, you can see that in the lead up to the election here in the state of Nevada, Donald Trump was ahead by 0.8%, and Hillary Clinton ended up winning that state by 2.4%. So in some situations, it does actually tend to actually overestimate Donald Trump in some of the polls here. You can see that in the lead up to the 2016 election, you can see Hillary Clinton was ahead by almost 4.8%, and it quickly became smaller as the election neared on. But still, as you can see, it did definitely underestimate Hillary Clinton by a large margin of approximately 3.2%. So I think that will be definitely important that we're taking a look at that. And Nevada is definitely a state that I could see definitely going towards the Kamala Harris camp. In the state of Wisconsin, I think the state of Wisconsin will vote for the former president. It is one of the most conservatives of the Rust Belt states. If you go back to 2020, if you go back to around 2020, you can see that in the lead up to the election, Joe Biden was ahead by approximately around 6.7%, and he only ended up leading by 0.7%, which means that the polls overestimated Joe Biden by around 6%. So if you were to add that on to this, you could obviously see that Donald Trump has been increasing his lead here in some of these states here. He obviously is only behind of Kamala Harris by 1%. Easily, if there is even a 2 or 3 point margin of error, which if you go back to 2020, there was a 6 point margin of error where it overestimated Kamala Harris. Even if you go back to 2016, it overestimated Hillary Clinton by around 6 to 7%. So as you can see, Wisconsin is definitely a state that I could see going towards the former president. Wisconsin definitely does have a lot of rural regions, which could be one of the reasons for why it is very difficult to poll. And the polling data, generally speaking, always overestimates the Democrats in both 2016 and 2020. So as you can see here, the polls obviously are showing Kamala Harris ahead. They have been showing Kamala Harris ahead. Yet, I wouldn't necessarily say that these polls are that accurate in terms of whether or not they're going to be accurate for this election. They haven't been accurate in the last two elections. I don't think they're going to be accurate in this election. The fact that they show Kamala Harris only ahead by 1% means that Donald Trump is definitely going to win in the state of Wisconsin. If I had to actually bet on it, I would say that Donald Trump has an upward 70%, 70 to 80% chance of winning the state of Wisconsin. Now, I know that's a bold prediction considering the fact that Kamala Harris is ahead, but if you go back to 2016 and 2020, consistently the polling data overestimates the Democrats. They overestimate them by around 6 to 7%. So, I mean, if you were to add 6% to this poll here, the average of the aggregate of these polls, Donald Trump would end up leading in the state of Wisconsin by around 5%. Okay, now I'm not necessarily saying that that might happen, but the fact that Kamala Harris is only ahead by 1% really goes to show that I think Donald Trump can definitely make some inroads here in the state of Wisconsin. Moving on from the state of Wisconsin, let's take a look at the state of Georgia. In the state of Georgia, Donald Trump is coming back. The polling data actually was pretty close here. If I were to take a look at this here, Kamala Harris was actually beating Donald Trump at one particular point. She was ahead by 0.2% about 2 weeks ago. Now, as you can see, Donald Trump again is taking back that lead at around September 15 or so. And these polls here obviously do show the former president ahead. Now, I wouldn't get too cocky on this due to the fact that if you go back to around 2020, in the lead up to the election, Donald Trump was ahead in the polls by 1%, yet he lost the state by 0.3%, meaning that the polls overestimated him by 1.3%. So I wouldn't necessarily get too cocky on this. Definitely, Kamala Harris has a good shot. Donald Trump's only ahead by 1.7%, so she can definitely possibly win this state, in the state of Georgia. Moving on from the state of Georgia, let's take a look at the state of North Carolina. Currently, Donald Trump is ahead by a very slim margin, actually, in the state of North Carolina, 0.1%. 0.1% is not a large margin whatsoever. If I were to go back to 2020, let me go ahead and take a look at 2020 for a second here. Let me open up this tab here. In around 2020 in North Carolina, you can see that in North Carolina, Donald Trump was leading in the polls in the lead up to the election by around 1.5% or so. I believe 1.5% in the lead up to the election. He was ahead by around 0.2%. He ended up leading by 1.3%, which means that the polling data underestimated him by 1.1%, which would mean that the polls actually did underestimate him in 2024. Also, if you go back to around 2016 here, 2016, Donald Trump in the lead up to the election was ahead by 1%. He ended up winning by 3.7%. So both in 2020 and 2016, the polls actually did end up underestimating Donald Trump. If I were to go back to 2012, in the lead up to the election, Mitt Romney was ahead in the polls by around 2%, and by 3%, and he ended up winning by 2%. If you go back to 2008, even, you can see that Obama was ahead in the polls by 0.3%. And Obama, let's see, he was ahead by 0.3%. I do know the average to show that he was ahead by 0.3%. He ended up winning by, I believe, around 0.2, 0.3%. So the point being, North Carolina polling data is accurate in 2012, and it was pretty accurate in 2008 as well. And also in 2016, it underestimated Donald Trump, and in 2020, it underestimated Donald Trump, which means for it to underestimate Donald Trump again is overestimate Donald Trump is extremely unlikely. Most likely, it's going to underestimate Donald Trump, which means that he is going to probably win in the state of North Carolina, if we based off of previous trends. Moving on to the state of Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is an extremely close race once again. Kamala Harris is ahead by 0.7%. If you were to base this off of previous margins, Donald Trump does actually end up winning. Again, the most recent polling data is pretty good for him. If you take a look at the last four polls, it shows him tied, ahead by 2%, 1%. Some of the polls that were coming out before, about a week ago, were showing Kamala Harris ahead by 5, 4, 3, 2, 3%. That was really bad for the Trump campaign. Even then, he could have possibly won. I mean, if you go back to even 2016, Donald Trump was way behind in the polls. He ended up winning. If you go back to around 2016, Donald Trump was behind of Hillary Clinton by around, I believe, 2.4%, 2.1%. He ended up winning by 0.7%. And in 2020 as well, he actually was behind of Joe Biden by around 4.2%. He ended up winning by around so he ended up losing by 1.2%. So again, if you were to take that average and apply it to this, Donald Trump would still end up leading, and he is doing good in some of the more recent polls that have been released. So that is as far as several of the swing states are concerned. In the state of Michigan, Michigan is also another one of those swing states that voted for Barack Obama by a 9% margin. Currently, Kamala Harris is ahead by 1.7%. The polling data does not necessarily look that good for the Republicans here in this state. I still think they will win, though. However, in this state, if you would apply a very small margin of error to this poll, I do think that they would end up winning. And I also think that this is a Rust Belt state. I think Donald Trump is doing pretty good in terms of working class voters in this election compared to Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris is currently at by 1.7%. Now, this is actually extremely difficult to predict in the state of Michigan. If you go back to around 2020, Joe Biden was ahead by 4.2%. He ended up winning by around 2.8%, which means that the polling data overestimated him by really around 1.4%, which if you apply that to the current polling data, Kamala Harris would still end up winning. But I do think that Donald Trump will end up winning. He does have an economic appeal for Rust Belt voters. I don't think Kamala Harris is the type of candidate to win in a state like Michigan. I think that Kamala Harris's campaign, personally, I think that it has a lot of 2016 vibes. To be honest with you, I think it has a lot of Hillary Clinton-esque vibes. Now, you could say that Kamala Harris isn't viewed as corrupt as Hillary Clinton. That is true. I would not argue with that you at all on that. But she really is bringing up her personal biography, Kamala Harris, way too often. And I think that's very, to a certain extent, that might be similar to Hillary Clinton as well. Hillary Clinton in the debates, she did bring up her personal biography quite a bit. And also, the whole abortion thing and everything. She is definitely trying to appeal to women, young women as well. So I don't necessarily think that young women are going to be enough to cross you in this election, to bring you across this election. But I could definitely see the state of Michigan going to Kamala Harris. Based on current polling data, I do want to be unbiased, obviously, and I would probably give the state of Michigan to Kamala Harris. Definitely go ahead and give it to Kamala Harris. I think that Kamala Harris would has a pretty good shot of winning. I think it's going to be a very narrow race. The 2024 election, regardless of what people are telling you, is going to be a close election. I mean, even if you base it off of the margin of error in previous elections, this is going to be a close election. I know some people are projecting that Donald Trump's going to win in like Minnesota and Virginia. I don't necessarily see that happening. I think this is going to really come down to the wire. And I think that it's really going to come down to the wire. That's what it is. And I have to be honest with you guys, it is going to come down to the wire because I'm gonna make no one happy by saying that. I'm not going to make Kamala Harris supporters or Donald Trump supporters happy by saying that. But in reality, I mean, Donald Trump, I do believe that, like, if you fill out the current electoral map, let me go ahead and fill it out and then give my more commentary on this. If you give him Washington, Oregon, California to Kamala Harris, Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, North and South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Georgia, South Carolina, West Virginia, Ohio, Indiana, Iowa. Let me go ahead and put Georgia back as being a toss-up state. But then going ahead and giving Donald Trump the state of Texas and Florida and Alaska, as well as Kamala Harris the state of Colorado and New Mexico and Illinois, Vermont, Connecticut, and Delaware, Maryland, D.C., Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and the state of New Jersey. New Jersey, I'm going to go ahead and put it as being a likely state, That means under 10%, but greater than 5%. So from 5% to 10%. And the state of New York, I'm going to make an interesting prediction for this. I'm going to go and put it as being in the likely column for Kamala Harris under 10%. I know Joe Biden did end up winning the state in 2020 by around 20%. That being said, the current polling data is not necessarily the best for Kamala Harris. Polling data, generally speaking, in New York tends to overestimate Democrats by around 10%. In 2020, they overestimated the Democrats by around 10%. So I think that it will be much more closer in the state of New York and also the state of Minnesota. I think that Kamala Harris will end up winning the state in the likely to lean margin. They're likely to lean margin there, really. And then let's move on to the state of New Hampshire. Again, we're going to put it in the likely to lean margin as well. Likely to lean margin. So moving on from that, let's go ahead and get the state of Nebraska. Nebraska at large. Nebraska's first and the Nebraska's second congressional district. And let's go ahead and give Kamala Harris as well, Donald Trump, the state of Utah. And we'll leave the rest of the states blank for now. Florida will go to obviously in the likely column, as well as the state of Texas. Kamala Harris will end up winning the state of Hawaii, and Donald Trump will end up winning the state of Alaska in the likely column, under 10%. So that is for those particular states. And let's go ahead and give the at-large vote in the state of Maryland, in the state of Maine, as being in the tilt column for Kamala Harris, and Maine's first congressional district as being safe. Now I'm going to go ahead and fill out some of the individual swing states here. The state of Arizona will go to the former president. It is a border state. Donald Trump's currently ahead in the state. The state of Nevada will go to Kamala Harris. The state of Michigan will go to Kamala Harris as well. Donald Trump will win the state of Wisconsin, the state of Pennsylvania, the state of New York, not New York, North Carolina, and the state of Georgia. Okay, and we'll leave Nebraska's second congressional district. I promise you that when I do my final prediction, I will include Nebraska's second congressional district, but for now I am leaving it blank. So with that being said, we have Donald Trump at 291 electoral votes and Kamala Harris at 247 electoral votes. This is a close election. What I do want to say, however, is that Michigan could really go either way. I am really doubting on this hit in Michigan. I do see that there's a high Arab Muslim population that could end up shifting over to Jill Stein. I saw some polls that show that Jill Stein was taking upwards 30% of Muslim voters in some of the swing states, and approximately 2% of Michigan's voters are Muslims. 2% are Muslims, which could mean that if 0.3% of Muslims in the state of Michigan vote for Kamala Harris, which 0.3 of 2% would be around I believe 0.7 around 0.7%. So around 0.7%. If 0.7% of voters vote for Jill Stein in the state of Michigan, since 2% of them are 2% of them are Muslims, if 30% of them vote for Jill Stein, which, by the way, is one of the reasons why the Democrats do not want Jill Stein running. If I were the Democrats, I would hate it if Jill Stein is running in this election. Jill Stein is taking a lot of pro-Palestine voters, from them, a lot. Kamala Harris is obviously, trying to verbally, she's talking in a more pro-Palestine way. More, she's kind of trying to even it out. She's kind of not trying to offend anybody. She's trying to, be pro-Israel and pro-Palestine at the same time. But really, everybody knows he's going to be pro-Israel. Okay, the Kamala Harris will give money to Israel no matter what. Okay, everybody knows that. Okay, like no one's second doubting that. She might not. I'm not sure. I mean, I think that the two parties are pro-Israel. Okay, no matter what, they're going to be pro-Israel. No matter what the polls are saying, they're going to be pro-Israel. No matter what. So I think that a lot of Muslim voters are going to see through that. A lot of Muslim voters are going to be like, okay, you're saying you're pro-Israel, pro-Palestine and everything, but your administration is giving billions of dollars to Israel at the same time. And they did a speech in Congress, Benjamin Netanyahu. So I don't necessarily think that a lot of Muslim voters are going to buy the whole Kamala Harris is pro-Palestine and everything. And I don't think, obviously, they're not going to vote for Donald Trump, which, I mean, some of them are, a little bit weird and they're voting for Donald Trump, which doesn't make sense. I mean, if you're pro-Palestine and you're voting for Donald Trump, that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever because Donald Trump is even more pro-Israel. I mean, maybe they might do the same thing in terms of rhetoric. They'll do different things in terms of rhetoric, but Donald Trump is even more pro-Palestine than Kamala Harris. I mean, you can't even deny that regardless of who you are. But Jill Stein is definitely getting voters in the state of Michigan. So it definitely could shift over. I think that Jill Stein will be an upsetter for this election, similar to how Ralph Nader was an upset for the Green Party in the 2000 election for Al Gore. And by the way, I do think that Al Gore, the Green Party did spoil the election for Al Gore in the state of Florida. Similar to that, I think that the Green Party is definitely going to take votes away from Kamala Harris, similar to how they did in 2016, where they took votes away from Hillary Clinton. Now, in terms of Hillary Clinton, I still think Hillary Clinton maybe might have lost, even if Jill Stein was not on the ballot, just because of how small the margins were. But who knows? She might have been able to win. And the Green Party, really, I mean, they're just taking votes away from the Democrats, which doesn't even make sense since they're more Democrat and more liberal. But I definitely think the state of Michigan can flip. As far as the state of Nevada is concerned, Nevada is a state that, I mean, the polls, look, let's take a look at the polls right now. Nevada, the polls overestimate the Republicans, generally speaking. In 2020, they were accurate. If the polls are accurate, Donald Trump will lose the state by an extremely small margin. I think it probably will go to a recount in the state of Nevada if it goes by a smaller margin, as we are seeing. But the polls really are dead tight as far as these states are concerned. As far as Kamala Harris's most likely path to 270 electoral votes, I think that her most likely path to 270 is actually with her number of electoral votes she currently has, 246. All she has to do is flip Pennsylvania. Let's go ahead and give her Pennsylvania. Okay, Pennsylvania. She flips Pennsylvania. Let's see the polls go in her direction. Currently, they're not going in her direction in Pennsylvania, but let's say they go in her direction. If she wins Pennsylvania, she's at 265. At that point, basically, if she just flips, for instance, let's say the state of Georgia. If she flips the state of Georgia, she's at 281, which in that case, she wouldn't have to win the state of Nevada. Or you have the path where she wins Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, which I don't think is possible. Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, she's not going to win all four. All three. She won't win all three. There's absolutely no way she wins all three. If you go back to 2020, 2016, it overestimated the Democrats, overestimated them again and again. She's not going to win Wisconsin. She's not going to win Michigan. She's not going to win the state of Wisconsin. There's no way she's going to win the state of Wisconsin. I can put a 90% chance Kamala Harris will not win the state of Wisconsin. Sorry, 70%, 70 to 80% chance she will not win the state of Wisconsin. Pennsylvania, I think she's not going to win either. I don't think she has a good appeal there. Michigan, she could potentially win in. And also the state of Nevada, she could potentially win in. Then after that, you could go ahead with Georgia potentially. Although Georgia polling data is not headed in her direction whatsoever. Currently, the Georgia polling data is showing that former President Trump is at by 1.7%, which is not good at all for her whatsoever. So really, she doesn't really have too many paths. Or she could do she could potentially win Arizona. Let's see what paths she has with Arizona. If she wins Arizona, let's go ahead and take these out right now. If she were to win the state of Arizona, then let's say she were to win North Carolina, okay, in this potential, North Carolina, which I don't think she's going to win North Carolina, but she might. North Carolina, and then Pennsylvania. That's another path she could potentially take. Arizona, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania. But I don't see that happening. That's not going to happen. There's no way she's going to do. That's a weird type of scenario that she's going to have. That won't end up happening. But if she wins Pennsylvania, which she has to win Pennsylvania, by the way, guys, if Donald Trump wins the state of Pennsylvania, just to give this to you in perspective, get rid of Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, and North Carolina. If Donald Trump wins the state of Pennsylvania, it's really bad for her because then Donald Trump, he's probably going to end up winning the state of Arizona. Donald Trump's probably going to end up winning the state of Arizona. I have about a 70% chance Donald Trump's going to win the state of Arizona. Then you give Donald Trump the state of Wisconsin, which I also think he has a high chance of winning. He's at 256, 259. And at that point, all he has to do is win North Carolina, which I think he can probably win, or even Georgia, or Nevada, or Michigan at that point. So I think she definitely needs to take the state of Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is going to be crucial for her. If Kamala Harris does not win the state of Pennsylvania, she would have to win Michigan and then Nevada, follow that up with, let's say, Wisconsin. I'm not sure really. Wisconsin, that would be really difficult for her to win the state of Wisconsin. If Donald Trump wins the state of Pennsylvania, and this is the problem for her, she has to win the state of Wisconsin and Arizona. I don't think she's going to win those two states. Then she'd have to go to North Carolina or Georgia. Georgia, there's almost no way she's going to win. She could potentially win in Georgia. She's only behind by 1.7%. Potentially, if she wins there, then she'd have to win North Carolina or Wisconsin or Arizona, which I don't think is very likely. So Kamala Harris really needs to spend a lot of her energy in terms of what I would advise the Kamala Harris campaign. She has to spend time and energy in Pennsylvania, a lot of time and energy. The Trump campaign as well. Pennsylvania is going to be an extremely important state in this election. Pennsylvania will be definitely important. But for now, let's go ahead and take a look at this. For this prediction, as of right now, Donald Trump here winning the state of Arizona, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, the state of Pennsylvania, and the state of Wisconsin. Kamala Harris with the state of Nevada and the state of Michigan. So if you like this video, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below and like the video. Early voting actually does start pretty soon. Early voting has already begun in Minnesota, South Dakota, and Virginia. It's already beginning. This article was released on September 20th, so about 2 days ago. So early voting is already beginning. So it will be important to kind of track where exactly all of this is heading. But if you like this video, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below and like the video. Make sure you do subscribe because we are very close to reaching 500 subscribers. I do want to reach 600 subscribers before the election. So if you could go to 500 by the time this video finishes or so, that would be kind of nice. So make sure that you hit the subscribe button down below. Make sure you comment down below. Agree or disagree with this prediction? Write that down in the comment section below, and I'll see you in the next video.